Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear
perfectly.
you, Rakeshji.
Okay. So it might take me a little time for my video to come. I don't know what is the problem, but I will get started right away. Just a minute. I'm just firstly, good evening, everybody. Um, uh, I will just bring up a couple of slides. Unfortunately, today's session, I will have to rely a bit on the slides. So just give me a minute. I'll bring them up and then we get things started. Is my screen visible to you?
Yes,
Yes.
Rakeshji,
Yes,
we can see your
yes,
screen.
yes.
All right. So I think let me start from the start, how this whole uh, journey began. And it can't start without naming Arunji. It was on 24th of December. We had a session from Pawan on randomness and risk management. And it was in that session that after that session, Arunji had shared almost close to midnight. He had shared this problem, and I saw it in the morning, and this was the first time I had seen this problem. So before we kind of get deeper into it, I think very quickly I'll just kind of bring up the problem and make sure everybody's on aware of it. I'm sure most of you are, but just very quickly. So basic idea is, if you start with a positive integer, let's say I'm taking the same example which Arunji had taken. Then let's say it is 9. So if it is an odd number, then we basically multiply it by 3 and add 1. So which means 3 into 9, which becomes 28. And you get an even number. And because it's an even number, we will divide it by 2. So it's 28 by 2 equal to 14. So this is how, so whatever number you get, if it is an odd number, you multiply it by 3 and add 1. If it is an even number, then you divide it by 2. And that's how you, if you're supposing you continue this, regardless of which number you kind of start with, it would eventually lead you to this 4 to 1 as the as a recurring thing. And thereafter obviously it becomes it kind of keeps recurring as 4, 2 and 1. So this is the problem. And I mean, this is the, I would say, the conjecture. And it's obviously something which has taken a lot of time and years, and still it has remained as an unsolved problem. So I saw this in the morning, on the very next day morning, and my first reaction was that this is looking more like a trick than a problem. And why I thought so is because, it says, basically you can do this any number of times until you reach 4, 2, and 1. You can keep trying it. So, this was looking like a problem which is, you can keep trying. And eventually, because you have infinite trials, you would kind of keep torturing the numbers until they fall in line. So this is how I've kind of first thought about this. And I mean, this is very similar to what we call as infinite monkey problem, that, if you give infinite time to a monkey, it might eventually, end up creating the works of Shakespeare. So this is how I kind of initially, my first reaction was this. And that's where I think the very first insight, if I have to, bring up, was that the framing of a problem matters, because it was framed in the context of randomness. And the message was also that, there is a very wild amount of fluctuation which happens. When you look at this, the numbers keep fluctuating up and down, and they don't seem to have a rhyme or a reason. But eventually they would still, end up in this particular. This is one area where, I mean, I think every time you look at a problem, sometimes the background information colors how you look at the problem also. So, very immediate thought was, it's like trials. When you look at a random problem, you basically talk about trials. And then, when I talk about infinite trials, It's basically an implicit kind of a assumption. So it's not that I must have thought about this randomness at the first instance, but I think at the back of my mind, this is how the mind kind of looked at it, and it thought that it would be this kind of a problem. Then after some time, when I looked up the internet, to my kind of amazement, I found that this is a problem which has remained unsolved for so many years. Obviously, Arunji had mentioned it, but once you kind of read so much about it, and it says that it has been verified to be true up to 2 raised to 68 numbers. And so this was my next reaction. And then I kind of, I was still looking at it from that point of view only, though it was fairly clear over a period of time that this is not a random problem, it's a deterministic problem. But, I was still looking at it from that point of view of a probability, that, if supposing you do trials, then what is the expected value, which is a kind of term in probability. And based on that, I was still trying to figure out what is the reason for convergence. So this was my kind of, third reaction to the problem. Um, and so this again, I'm bringing this up more from a context perspective, right? In the beginning, once I look at a problem and how I receive it, and then how I kind of, my mind starts, working on the problem. It's very important, especially if one is looking at a problem solving scenario, then, how I receive the problem, how I receive the information relating to the problem, and then how I kind of, process it and make sense of it. It kind of forms the initial basis of, handling that information. So I think the next takeaway I would say is that, I was still becoming very impulsive. I was looking at a problem and I was almost like thinking of a solution immediately. And I was disregarding the fact that it's a deeper problem. It's a problem which has remained unsolved for years. And therefore, I could possibly be thinking a little more about it. But more than that, I was effectively, kind of reacting to the problem rather than responding to it. So, which is where I feel that, sometimes you look at a problem and you have certain intuitions, and those intuitions are well placed. Some of the things which you see on this slide, when I kind of, go further deeper into it, some of them stand out and they kind of, they have been helpful in the further inquiries. But it is also that I was trying to jump to the conclusions, which was little too premature. So, this thing that there is much more to the problem, that has not stopped even now. Every time I look at this problem, I can never say that one has looked at it from all the possible angles and nothing is being missed out. It's almost like a very layered kind of a problem. And every time one looks at it, there is a kind of a revelation which is waiting just to be discovered. So, again, that the problem could be much deeper, and one needs to kind of, be more patient and apply oneself a little more closely to it. So, this is how my kind of introduction to this problem started. And, I think after few exchanges where Arunji explained that this is a problem which has, a lot of people have tried, they have given, they kind of taken a lot of approach to the problem. And then I was kind of, I kind of started looking at it a little more differently. But before I go further into that problem, I think it's also important to look at it now from a, kind of in a holistic way, that this is a problem where firstly the noise is very high. If you look at, say for example, numbers 1 to 63, and you try to plot in terms of how many steps you require for it to get to that final convergence. And then, the numbers keep varying very wildly. And I've just taken up to 63, but I think it still conveys the message that, it's a very wild kind of a thing. It doesn't have a predictability that, given a number, how many steps it will require for it to converge. And then I've taken a very extreme example on the right side, where if you look at, 27 as the starting point, then it takes about 111 steps before it goes to the final convergence. And if you look at the absolute numbers, it kind of just goes from 27 to 1780, then slightly, it kind of comes down and again goes up to 7288, and then eventually it goes right up to 9232. And then it kind of, eventually settles down. So those 111 trials, and then, this is what happens. So if supposing you look at this problem as it is presented, it obviously it shows you a very strong case that there is a lot of randomness to it. There is a lot of fluctuation, and those fluctuations look unpredictable. They don't look manageable. They seem quite daunting. And then if you add the supplementary information, that what you gather from the net. So Wikipedia very clearly says that a certain mathematician has said that mathematics may not be ready for such a problem. That's a very, very strong statement to make for a problem, that mathematics the way we understand may not be ready to kind of solve this kind of a problem. And then another one has said that it's an extraordinarily difficult problem, completely out of reach of present day mathematics. So once you look at the problem on its face value, and also when you look at what the experts have to say, it definitely looks like a very daunting problem. Now the question is, if supposing this is the situation, this is what one is given with, what should one do? Should we simply assume or accept that yes, this is an unsolved problem, and maybe it's in the domain of the mathematicians? They would break their heads and somehow eventually sometime find the solution, but it is not our cup of tea. This is one thing which one can always kind of draw a conclusion, and which is a fair thing, which is a fair conclusion to draw. And that's how our mind also looks at a problem, and it decides whether it's a battle worth fighting or not. Because a mind eventually is a slave of what reward it is going to get. And if the chance of a reward is less or minimal, then it has very little incentive to work in that direction. And if the challenge is so high that the effort is going to be so heavy, then it would rather conserve the energy, and it would not rather kind of spend its effort over there. But that is when you look at the reward as a solution, that I have a problem and my only reward is that I have to find a solution. If I look at the problem and its its complexity, and I kind of look at it more from a curiosity perspective, why is it that this problem is behaving like this? If it is so random, then why is it eventually converging? And is it that if supposing it is converging up to 2 raised to 68, there is still some number hiding somewhere which is not going to converge? Or that there is madness, but there is a method to this madness? The problem very clearly has those evidences right in front of us, that yes, it looks very random, but it settles down. We know it settles down, and it settles down almost as a rule. So there has to be some mechanism playing, there has to be something underlying which is kind of driving this problem. So what should be my reward? Should it be that I have to solve the problem, or should it be that I have to understand that mechanism? I have to submit to this problem. I have to, try and kind of listen to what it is trying to say. I kind of look at, it from various angles, and I try to figure out that is still, despite, the apparent randomness, is there still any pattern? Is there something that I can do to progress and understand this problem better? If you look at us as grown-ups, then, this barrier is very strong, that we will look at, when if we are looking at a problem, we want to look at it whether it is solvable or not. And if it comes with a reputation that, 1937 is when this problem was floated, and it's been 87 years and no one has been able to solve it, then it all the more becomes a big barrier even to, try to look at it and attempt it. But if we look at, how we must have been as a child, we were not like this. this is not how our brain was earlier reacting. If one is given a situation or given a problem, a child would like to explore, because the child has the innocence of not kind of going by the reputation of a problem. It doesn't immediately calculate whether it would be able to solve the problem or not, but it is curious, and that curiosity eventually kind of gets a little bit, I would say, it kind of it takes its own different route, where that curiosity is good when I know that I am going to be able to get I will be able to reach the destination. But I no longer kind of enjoy the journey. The joy of the journey somewhere kind of gets lost. If I have to, in my entire discussion today, if I have to look at one takeaway, and I say that this is, I have to say that this is the most important thing I have to communicate today, I would say it is this, that, it basically looking at curiosity and trying to preserve that. So it's one is preserving or, kind of nurturing it for ourselves. The second is, how do I make sure, let's say, children in my vicinity, when they grow up, they don't become the so-called grown-ups. They still, maintain their curiosity, they nurture their curiosity, they grow it. How do I kind of, bring that about? And when we go through the specific details of the problem, we will realize that actually opinions can be wrong. And even if it is an expert who's, floating these, opinions, those can still be opinions. They may not be facts. And this is something which will be, we will kind of explore as to whether this really holds when we go further into the problem. And the second is that one doesn't have to necessarily be a expert to attempt a problem. I am not going into the details of this particular aperiodic tiling, but it's an important thing. If you look it up, there is this person called David Smith, who's actually an amateur, but he was the one who figured out the first solution to this problem. Not only the first, but he kind of came up with another sequence of I think at least one or two more solutions to the same problem. And it was a complete amateur. And sometimes an amateur may have an advantage, because a trained mind is also a constrained mind. When I look at it, as a trained person, then I look at a problem in a certain way. I have a kind of conditioned way of looking at it. But if I'm an amateur, I can start with a clean slate. And there I might actually have an advantage versus an expert. So, I will move to the next slide, but if I have to, kind of focus on one area and say the core message, I think this is what is the core message which I would want to convey in this session. Now coming to the problem itself, I think this is that one more last reaction, which kind of is something I thought I will still capture. This is again from our Learning Together group, that after getting the inputs, I still said this, that does not matter if one can't solve, but it is the right caffeine for the mind. And that actually is something that caffeine had its own, kind of, I mean, it kind of kept growing on me, and it's kind of kept me busy. And again, there is a bit of a, I would say, learning here, that a mind has its own delusions. Like, when I'm saying it's the right caffeine, I'm still sticking to that same path which I had started with, that I'm looking at frequency of occurrence, and I'm seeing, how many odd occurrences are happening, how many even occurrences are happening. And I'm still trying to figure out that if supposing, if there is a reason why the convergence is happening based on this particular idea. And there is a little bit of an arrogance in this particular statement also. It's almost like, I have nearly solved a problem. It's just a matter of, proving it, but I know why it is happening. That's what this, this statement says. And which is where, the mind has its own way of deluding me. There are some helpful delusions and there are some unhelpful delusions. An unhelpful delusion is that, I believe this is it. I jump to a conclusion. I have understood the problem. I know what is happening. I may not be able to prove it right away, but I know exactly what's going on. That's the kind of, arrogant belief that, kind of I experienced when I must have written this. And in hindsight, it looks fairly silly. But I mean, this is how I looked at it. These are my utterances. And the helpful, delusion is that it kind of keeps you in that hope. It always, you feel you are close to solving it. Because of this arrogant belief that I have tried, kind of figured it out, but I'm only a step away. And therefore, that problem doesn't leave me. Then that problem keeps growing on me because it's just that last step left. So, if I solve it, I have it. And therefore, I am hooked to the problem. And this is typically how games are designed. You get addicted because you always feel that, the level which you have crossed, you can very easily go to the next level. And, that kind of difficulty looks manageable and therefore you keep going. So this is how my mind was functioning, that on one hand, I was thinking that I have the problem, right in my grips, and just a little more effort and I should be able to get, solve it. And that's how it kind of kept happening, not for a few days, it kind of kept happening. I think it continued for a couple of months. And my addiction, that caffeine became a drug, it became an addiction. And this is a message which I have not shared in the learning together group, but there is another kind of a satellite group in which I had shared this message. Again, I thought I'll bring it up here because this session is about experience, how I have experienced this problem. It's not so much about the mathematics, but what I have gone through, what kind of, mental processes must have happened. So maybe it's a very helpful thing here. There was a moment when, I was like, there was a period when I was so gripped with this problem that actually it would run whether I am at home, whether I am at work, whether I am, at some other place. But my mind would be fully occupied with this particular problem. And, there are a couple of instances. One is, a number of burnt dishes during, those periods, if when I was cooking breakfast. And second was, I went for a shopping and like, I mean, I'm kind of thinking of this problem in my mind. There's nothing else in front of me. I can very nicely see what's there, but my mind is not registering. And I almost stepped into the ladies' room of a in a mall. So I mean, this is the kind of I would say addiction which I must have experienced during this time. I won't say it's a bad addiction, but it's important to kind of, recognize that sometimes a problem can take control of, one's own mind. And then I don't know whether I am serving the problem or the problem is, kind of using me as the tool. I think I was in that state during that period. And I'll come back to this particular moment when this happened. But for now, I'm just kind of, bringing it up to say that there was a period of madness while I was kind of grappling with this problem. Okay, having said this, now let's get down to the discoveries which kind of happened during this process. There were quite a few of them. I will not kind of go very deep into all of them, and I will not kind of cover all of them, but a couple of the starting ones which kind of give us a clue in terms of how the problem started revealing itself. So the very first thing was that if you look at these problems, if you look at the number 27, 82, 41, you'll find that every time there is a odd number converted to the even number, the very next, the moment you basically convert odd by 3n plus 1, you get an even number. That is by design, because if n is odd, 3n will always be odd, and therefore 3n plus 1 will always be even. So because you get an even number, you're bound to divide it by 2. So every time there is a 3n plus 1, it will always follow by an n by 2. It will always have a division step. So if supposing that is always going to be there, then why not, instead of 3n plus 1, I consider 3n plus 1 divided by 2. that is both the steps together as one step. And this looks like a very small thing, but it has its own effect on the entire, complexity of the problem. And also the very first reaction, which I had mentioned, where I was still counting the occurrences. And I was wondering why the odd occurrences are much lesser compared to the even occurrences. And that answer kind of comes in here the moment I realize that your 3n plus 1 and n by 2, these have to go together and it has to become 3n plus 1 by 2. So first thing that happens is it kind of reduces the number of steps, obviously, because we have combined a few steps. But it also has a significant effect in terms of the noise which the problem now presents. For example, if the starting number 27 is my favorite number because of its it's the first number which has these many steps involved. And I mean, I have not figured it out completely, but I feel that if I can understand why 27 behaves like this, then possibly I would have a better answer for everything else in the problem. So which is why kind of this is the number which you will keep encountering while I discuss about it. If you see the left and the right, you suddenly see that the level of noise is much lesser. And it is still has a certain amount of fluctuation, and it can even be called random, but it is still far, far less compared to what you see on the left side. So that's the first discovery. I just want to make a clarification that I must have found this out independently, but during last few months, I have also looked at what is the literature available on this problem. So there is this nice help available from Google Scholar. If you pick up a particular subject and if you try to see what papers have been published, you get a kind of a view of them. So there are, like, right now, if I look at it, there are about 3,900 odd papers which you get to see over there. Every year about 200, so about 1,000 papers get published on this particular problem every year. And a few years back, this particular revelation was there in one of the publications that, this particular, problem can be looked at little more in a simplified way if 3n plus 1 becomes n, 3n plus 1 upon 2. Here, after whatever we talk about, I haven't found any single publication where these, discoveries are there. So until I kind of find something, I can continue to claim that maybe some of these discoveries are fairly unique. And which is where I would come back to that point of an amateur, that maybe, if one looks at it from a non-mathematician's point of view, maybe there are a few more things to discover. Coming to this, this is the first discovery we had, and because of which there is a certain amount of smoothing of the problem. The second discovery has been a little, I would say it's a very important stepping stone, which kind of, helped in making the problem much simpler, or at least it started revealing its pattern because of this. So I basically looked at the numbers, and this is again same 27 and up to 1, what is happening here. And if you see those odd numbers, there are some odd numbers which are immediately, reducing. Now, firstly, one point of clarification, you will now see consecutive odd numbers also, because we have made 3n plus 1 upon 2. So, you don't get an even number immediately after an odd number. You can get consecutive odd numbers also. And once you see them, then you wonder why is it that certain numbers you get, like 31, it goes 5 times before it converts into an even number, but 121 converts immediately. And I think this is again a little important thing, that when you look at a problem and you then look at it a little more fundamentally and say that why certain numbers are behaving in one way and another set of numbers are behaving in another way, there was a certain amount of mathematics which went into it, which I am not getting into in this session. But eventually, the pattern revealing itself was like this, that if I look at 27, it is basically, if I have to convert it into the highest power of 2, then it is 7 into 4 minus 1, 28 minus 1. And likewise, I can look at each number and I can find out the power of 2 on for each number. And, if I replace this 2 by 3, okay, what I get is the even number, which is the eventual number, ignoring all the in between odd numbers. So if I look at 31, I get 242 directly without going through the steps 41, 71, 107, 161, etc. I straight away get this. And this was a very important, I would say, revelation, which kind of, this problem presented. And of course, once you look at the even number, then again you can convert it into the highest power of 2. And then, of course, you have to strip out that power of 2 to get the next odd number. I hope I'm kind of not going too technical, and I hope it is understandable. If it is not, then kind of stop me. I can spend a little time, but again, I'm not going to spend too much into the mathematics part of it. This is probably the last one where I will spend some time, or maybe second last one. But the idea is that I am able to jump straight from an even number, odd number to an even number, and I can actually do away with in between numbers, and there will be no loss to the quality of the solution. So, this is one discovery which was very helpful. So if I now look at this problem, I can actually rephrase it in this way, that if I have a number n, and if it is an odd number, which is represented like this, that it is a odd, root number multiplied by 2 raised to n minus 1, I have to convert it into x into 3 raised to n minus 1. And if it is an even number, which is in this format, it becomes x. So the problem statement becomes a little more, simplified. And the effect of it is that if you now look at the sequence for the same 27, it's an odd even sequence, that I start with 27, I get the next odd number, then I get the next I get the next even number, then the odd number, and likewise. It's a alternating odd even sequence right up to the point I get the convergence to 1. And this actually does a lot to the randomness or the noise of the problem. A lot of the noise gets reduced, significantly reduced, and you are able to now, if you look at it, this was like 70 steps, this has become 35 steps. I think it was 75 or something, and it has become about 35 steps. And there is still fluctuation, but that the amount of noise has significantly come down. And this again, the pattern remains the same, but of course the number of steps has come down. If you look at first 63 numbers, why? Because obviously we have combined multiple number of steps. And so again, if I have to just pause here and draw some insight here, I think what helped this discovery was a fundamental inquiry. When you look at a problem and you look at its root and say, why is it behaving in a certain way? You get into the depth of, because I have to find the mechanism of, which is underlying the problem. And that mechanism to be discovered will require certain root level questions to be asked. And those questions are very illuminating. They may or may not solve the problem, but they can give you a lot of valuable insights. This particular thing that I replace a power of 2 by power of 3 has actually given a very different flavor to this problem compared to when we started with it, and how it was looking versus how this problem looks now. There is a significant I would say impact, and this actually has helped a lot in the subsequent discoveries. So this when this happened, again my mind started playing tricks with me. So I basically first noticed that because of this, firstly, if you look at the odd numbers, you will never receive a multiple of 3 after the very first conversion. You will never receive an odd number which is a multiple of 3. Not going into the details of it, but that's how it is. So which means that on the very first cycle, the total population of odd number reduces by 1/3. And then the second, the even number that you get, those are also actually just 1/3 out of the total population. So basically, it's like something into 3 raised to n minus 1. And that one would always be like 2, then 8, then 14. In between, you will not have 4, you'll not have 6, and likewise. So 1 in 3 even numbers remain in the system. Again, two-thirds of them are lost. So that kind of, suddenly became as if I have, kind of found a big solution to the problem. And I felt that, because it is reducing in the very first cycle, and then it would keep reducing in the subsequent cycles, and therefore I would have convergence. So what I did is I checked it with the small population of numbers. And it somehow gave me that, maybe because I was working with a bias or a preconceived, expectation, it kind of made me think that I have got it. And when I felt I have got it, then I kind of prepared a very detailed note. And it was like I had done it with a lot of fancy terms in it, like the multiplications operation, I called it as an up train, and the division operations, I called it as a down train. And then the terminal stations, so even number and odd number, all of those, and the number one, and the even series which relates to that number one, I called it as the Nirvana Express. And I kind of created this note, and I remember I must have kind of shared it in that smaller group closer to the midnight or possibly around that time. And I was in my mind very convinced that I've got it. Okay. And I mean, it kind of, I should have again thought that this is a problem which has got a reputation of 87 years. So I should have been doubly cautious. I should have been thinking about it better, and I should not have, kind of let my expectations overrun my reality. But that's how it was. So I think this again brings me to a realization that when looking at a problem, humility is a helpful thing, patience is a helpful thing. And there has to be a space to consider that I may be wrong. I might have found something, I might think I'm on the right track, but whether I have found a solution really, or whether I have, kind of, I'm deluding myself. So that is something which kind of, I think, was a learning which I got through this particular exercise. So again, a good takeaway for me. It's not just the solution of the problem, but how I was reacting to the problem, and how I was behaving when the problem was, showing me certain glimpses. Every time I found something, I would think that I have kind of, I've made a huge discovery. And later on, I would realize that, oh, I have not considered something, and therefore I have to again go back. And this was not the first time. I mean, this was not the only time I have succumbed to this. Every subsequent, not every, but many subsequent occasions, when I found something, I felt as if I have got it. And then there was some or the other, small thing which was still remaining. And when I look at it, I realize, oh, I'm still quite a little away from the problem. I have not solved it. Okay. So when basically now I mean, again, I'm not going into too many things, but there are like many more discoveries which I've had during this period. So, that disappearance of odd numbers. So, this series 6i minus 3. And then, there are these two remaining terms, 6i minus 5 and 6i minus 1, which keep coming every time on the odd side as well as on the even side. And there is a very kind of interesting interplay that happens with the powers of 2 and powers of 3 between these numbers. Then if I break down my all the odd numbers into 4 sub-series, then you can prove that the sequential numbers, like if in some cases first and second, third and fourth, n equal to 1, n equal to 2, n equal to 3, n equal to 4, they all kind of converge, and they form the same pattern. In other cases it would be 2 and 3, 4 and 5, and likewise, but it's always the adjacent values of n which converge. And also, there is a certain amount of discovery on the geometric series where, if you look at a number into 4 raised to n, then, it kind of, it has us a lot of interesting things over there. And also there were enough, I would say, clues that this is not a random problem. This is a deterministic problem. And that there is a very strong method. It is not waiting for infinite trials for it to converge. it actually, if you look at it, around this point, basically here onwards, you will see that every time you're doubling the population of numbers, your number of cycles is actually just increasing very marginally. It's not kind of because you're doubling, your number of steps doesn't go high. And I am showing the median as well as the maximum. It doesn't kind of, show the signs that it goes berserk because I'm doubling the numbers. And also, if you look at actual patterns, you will find that the patterns which are or pathways which are created in the initial set of population, those pathways get reused here. So, it kind of goes for a period and then it picks up one of the routes and then it goes to convergence. And, those pathways, if I look at, like if I start from the opposite side, like you one, then, the next odd number and the next odd number, you will find that there are certain numbers which, like, they are like occupying 80-90% of the total, and this is on 2 raised to 16 up to those many numbers. If I look at and decide how many what is the incidence, I get this, which means that there is a certain highways which get created, and the solution follows that. And whichever numbers are showing down below, they also have a certain relationship to these highway numbers. For example, 5 and 85 and 21, they are actually related, and we'll see that in some. And even these 151227341, they are related. So it's kind of, there is a pattern which gets followed, and because of which the convergence happens. So that was one, I would say, interesting takeaway. What I have not done is I have not gone into the details of each one of them because that makes mathematics very heavy. But essentially, out of all of this, the numbers have started looking different to me now. Earlier, it was mathematics was a subject of knowledge to me. I would look at a thing and I would understand something and I feel that I have got it. But I had never felt numbers. I had never, spoken to numbers. Now I feel that numbers have a life of their own. When I look at 6i minus 3s, 6i minus 5, all of each one of them, I kind of, I'm able to look at them very differently and I'm able to look at their behavior in a certain way. So, this has given me much different kind of insights, which I would have robbed myself of if I had not, kind of delved into this problem further. If I had kind of stopped and said, this is not a solvable problem, so I might spend my time elsewhere, then maybe some of these, I would say this joy I would have, denied to myself. So I think there is a significant, I would say takeaway for me in this, that if I am faced with a problem, how I should be looking at it. Having said this, all of these so-called discoveries and everything, but they were still not adding up to the eventual proof. They were still not something which would give me a very clear understanding of what is happening, what is the method in the madness. There was some kind of an intuitive understanding, but it would not reflect into something which I can say that it is genuinely giving me the solution. And so it was kind of a dead end. And the dead end was because of this, that I can easily convert an odd number into an even number. But that even number, which odd number it will lead me to, that is something which is not very clear. And this is not something which I can derive mathematically. And that is where there was a gap. I cannot kind of, mathematically go from one odd number to the next even. I mean, I can go from an odd number to the even, but I can't go to the next odd number. And therefore, the cycle breaks. And this was kind of a dead end. And therefore, kind of deriving the conversion was looking like a problem. And then where it helped is basically when I looked at the problem completely differently from a very absolutely opposite end of the problem. And I said, why not I invert it? I look at it from the opposite end. What does it mean? I'm using 3n plus 1 upon 2 as my way of getting the next number. How about going the ulta direction, that if I start from my 1 4 2 and that series, and if I look at what is the role, what is happening if I look at 2n minus 1 upon 3. And one interesting thing is 2n minus 1 is actually a generic representation of an odd number. Any odd number, you represent it like that. and 2n minus 3 will always be an odd, it'll either be an odd number or it will be a fraction. So then I looked at which are the numbers which give me a whole number and which ones would give me fractional numbers. And then I am still left with this series. So if I look at 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, this series, it will always give me a full number, a whole number. If I do 2n minus 1 upon 3, and rest do not give me. That means and actually if I look at 3i minus 1, and if I multiply, now if I do this 2 into 3i minus 1 upon 3, what I get is 2i minus 1, which means the entire set of odd numbers I can derive by looking at this series. If I look at 3i minus 1 and do this operation, I will get the entire population of odd numbers. And this actually was a helpful discovery. The second thing alongside this was that every fourth member of this particular series is actually a part of the same series. Say, for example, if I do 2 into 4, it is 8. And 8 will be a part of this. If I do 5 into 4, it will be 20, and 20 is also part of the same set. 8 into 4 will be 32. That is also a part of the same set. And this was also a very helpful, discovery, because of which what I could look at is to draw this table in a certain way that, if I look at this 2, 5, then you will see that 8 is missing here. Why? Because 8 has come here. And I have 11, 14, and then, 17. But the 20 is missing because 20 has come here. And likewise, so if I arrange the, data in this manner, and I find its corresponding 2n minus 1 upon 3, the odd values. So mind you, here I still have a mix of even and odd numbers in the first column, but across here I get even numbers. Now, why I'm showing this? Because this is actually going to lead us to the important thing. What I have done here is these odd numbers, I have converted them into their root even numbers. So if it is 2, I have divided it by 2. If it is 14, then I have divided by 7. That's why different color. So this is basically what I have done. And now if I look at this, there is something which interesting that happens, and I'll show it in my next slide. Basically, this table, what I have done is I have just looked at now this root, and I have looked at the first column, and this I have ignored all the others because they are not so much material. So if I look at these two on the left side, and then I look at the odd numbers here, let me say that I have to look at 57 as a starting number, okay, on my that 3n plus 1 problem. Okay, so I simply they look at 57. I say that, okay, it will give me the next number is 43. And then for 43, I have to look up again in this table. I find 43 here, and then its next number is 65. And likewise, I keep going and I keep figuring out which is my next number. And it would go up and down, but eventually what it does is it gives me this. And every number that I encounter here is nothing but your sequence. If you actually start with 57, you will get the next even number as 86. Then you will get you will break it down into 43, and then you will get 65, and likewise. So your entire sequence of numbers in that sequence are now showing up in this table. And it's kind of, you can keep trying, and every number would fall like this, and it would eventually, it will give you the whole sequence right up to 1. And this was a very helpful discovery because of what? Because I had that dead end. And that dead end was that I am not able to mathematically convert an even number into an odd number. So I am not able to move from an odd to an odd and then next odd and likewise, which I am still not able to do mathematically. But I am able to do it now with the help of a lookup table. And this is not a lookup table, manually generated with any kind of arbitrary this thing. There is a clear formula based on which, all of this is all mathematically done. If you look at the yellow series and, pink series, the only difference is because these are even numbers. So what you're doing is your lookup, you are moving here. If it is an odd, then you can actually look up here. That's the only difference you're doing. And that is where that difficulty mathematically arises, that I am still not able to do a mathematical formula, but I'm able to jump all that and I'm able to get a way to represent that whole sequence in this lookup table. So this is again a good takeaway. I think I am running a little behind my time. I'll go a little faster. So I think so basically, again, dead end could be a dead end of imagination. Not delving on this further, I think it's clear enough. Now, why this is important is because it gives me an explanation of what is happening. I can explain why this particular series converges. And again, there is a difference between an explanation and a proof. A proof means I have to have a very irrefutable logical proof which tells me mathematically that it is the convergence is proved. An explanation is that we understand the mechanism, but mathematical proof, actually there's only one place where it's stuck, but it is still stuck. So I'm just kind of making that qualification. But if I look at this series and I kind of, now what I get is 1, 5, 21, 85. So 1 is already there. So 5 and 85, instead of, in this sequence, I bring them here and I call them as second level. Okay. So basically what I'm doing is I'm building the hierarchy. And actually it's a hierarchy of these series. So, this series is level 1, apex series. These two are level 2. I mean, you can do similarly for 341, etc. But I'm basically restricting it to what you see on this table. And then because I have here 1353, so I would use them, I bring them and I make the level 3. And likewise, now here I have 17 and 35. And likewise, if I keep building these levels, okay, and so basically you don't see these numbers because these numbers would come much later. So they don't come in the sequence. And this is where, the core assumption is that if supposing I can prove whichever number, it will still come. It will always come. It may come much later, but it will always come. That is the place where a proof is lacking. But otherwise, this basically is how, if I construct this, and now I look at this problem of 57, and I say what is happening here, I very clearly see that there is a process, there is a method in which this particular problem is moving. And this is what basically gives me a way of explaining as to what is happening in this particular problem. And which is what I call this as, so this is my apex series. And then what I do is 2n minus 1 upon 3. That's how I'll create all the odd numbers. Those odd numbers create my next series of even numbers, through which I get my next series of odd numbers. And each of them I call as E1, then E2, E3, E4. And obviously in each set, you will have multiple of them. If I organize the series or numbers in this fashion, then what happens is every time I'm doing the multiplication, 3n plus 1 upon 2, I'm moving upwards. And every time I'm doing a division, I'm moving left. So basically, wherever I start from, I'll move up, then left, then up, then left. And likewise, I would eventually move here. That's how basically the explanation of this problem, would present itself. Um, just again, as a rider, it's an explanation, a logical proof basically of this statement is something that is still eluding. But that's where I am right now with this particular problem. And I think most of the insights I have discussed, and I could possibly close here. The only, I think, one point is that, actually unsolved problems are not only in mathematics. We see unsolved problems in a lot of our life situations also. And I think, nurturing that curiosity and going a little deeper into those problems can sometimes help. So that's all from me. Thank you for patient listening. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer. I will close the slide sharing.
Thank you, Rakeshji. 1 hour
I
of
think
very
Gopal has a
intense.
question.
Yes.
Yeah,
Gopal.
Ashutosh ji.
Yeah. So Rakeshji, I mean, your passion around this is actually mind-boggling. So I mean, It's really, I mean, out of the world. So while you were sharing these slides, I could not help think about the Gödel's incompleteness theorem. So I don't know whether this Collatz conjecture and that Gödel's incompleteness theorem have been studied together or not. Because I'm not following that in that sense. But there are other similar problems also, wherein I mean, such dilemmas and such frustrations result, and where uh, those proofs are actually very. I mean, it is not one is not able to either prove or disprove that particular theorem. But when one goes into those multiple infinite rounds of calculation, etc., it always seems to hold true. But obviously, as you said, the mathematical proof is very difficult to get into that. And one of that is which I really dabbled during my IIT days was that Goldbach conjecture. If you are aware of that, which is also similar to this, wherein they say that any even whole number greater than 2 is sum of at least one pair of prime numbers. And there also, I mean, they have gone till 10 to the power 17 iterations, and still they cannot say that it is provable or not. So really, and all of these takeaways that you shared, they were, I mean, really insightful in that sense. Uh, so I don't know. I mean, should we look at this particular conjecture from that Gödel's incompleteness theorem perspective, wherein we can say that sometimes the proof may not be there, and sometimes the intuitions in such cases would be a valid means of knowledge rather than going into this logical loops and so on. I mean, your views on that.
Okay, so Gopalji, my knowledge of Gödel's theorem is very, I would say, minimal, and I haven't definitely seen something which kind of takes looks at both of these problems together. So maybe I may not be able to give a very definitive answer there. And see, until the time there is a proof, that's a reality that there is no proof so long as there is no proof. Um, I think for now, a good takeaway is that one is able to go deeper into the, as to what is happening. And one is able to figure out that, what you start with a very kind of wild fluctuating problem. And then you are able to take away all the noise and you're able to understand really what is happening, why, it's kind of going in a certain way and why is it eventually, giving that convergence. So at least that logical understanding, so long as that has come, that's a good, I would say, starting point. Having said this, the fact that this mathematical table is completely, I mean, that table is derived completely, and I am able to do the lookup, which means there is I mean, that lookup is not random. There has to be a way of representing it in mathematics, which I am still not able to figure out. But I have not lost hope because of that. I feel because it's, if it was a manually constructed table, then you can't see how the mathematics is playing out. But if it is mathematically constructed, then there should be some way of, that's the vertical arrows or the, the slanted arrows. Those are the ones where the mathematics is kind of, not coming forth. But because it's a derived table, I still feel there should be some way of doing it. If somebody is more mathematically inclined, maybe they can find a way of representing that. So I have not lost hope on that. But yes, on Gödel, I have not so much knowledge to be able to respond.
Sure, sure. But I mean, this was an amazing session, especially the takeaways was, I mean, mind-boggling. So really appreciate that. So thanks for
Thank
sharing
you
this.
so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, there are a couple of hands raised, and next I can see is Arun J himself. So Arun sir, your turn now.
Uh, uh, let Pankaj take over. I will come at the end. Since Pankaj is there, ask Pankaj to
Okay.
respond.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, sir. First of all, I must appreciate very. I don't have word to explain that you are so curious to solve this problem, and I have been watching this for so long. Actually, I myself have been trying a problem for last 15 years. on a Riemann hypothesis. So I can see those that you told that sometimes going to mall and losing, going to. So these things has happened. These things have happened with me very frequently. so 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 you become like a absent minded. You don't know. You are in a different world of imagining the things. So first of all, I must appreciate that what you have done. And then a few points I just would like to share that see, there have been a lot of many amateur players who have done a lot of discoveries. Okay, so there is no doubt about it. There in the history one can see so many amateur mathematicians who have done wonderful discoveries. So that's not a concern because that's really the fact that amateurs have an advantage to look at the problem in a very different way. So though they are not trained, so it has pros and cons. Secondly, as you
Absolutely.
told that someone talked about the Gopal sir or the Gödel incompleteness theorem. So in mathematics, problem is why do we assume that? Let me talk about why do we assume that everything is provable? First of all, this is itself a problem. We are trying
Yes.
to solve a problem, but right now what I am working on in the field of mathematics, why certain problems are solvable and why certain problems are not solvable. So that's my area of concern in broader mathematics. So it's simply assuming that because for a proof you have some axioms, you have some theorems. On that axiom or theorem, you are trying to base your result. But what if those axioms don't exist? This is an open question. So
Yeah.
simply trying to solve a problem without take by taking an assumption, by assuming something that it is definitely solvable, that's itself a very deep question. And
Yeah.
Gödel tried to address this very quick. So proving something, truth and proof are two different things. Okay. And apart from that, so you have wonderfully tried, you have come up with so many discoveries and all those things. I really appreciated this. But in mathematics, trying to understand, even there is a debate that is mathematics an experimental science or really proof based theory works, because there are a lot of problems, there are a lot of unsolved problems where mathematics is turning experimental. People are experimenting. Now you may have heard of the news that even artificial intelligence has cracked the International Mathematics Olympiad silver medal this time. So a lot of problems are being taken the help of computer science to look at the problem in an experimental way. So my point is that proving something and truth are two different things. There are a lot of assumptions we try to make.
Sure.
And
Sure.
at last, what I would like to say that randomness means कुछ भी हो जाएगा ऐसा नहीं होता है. Randomness means we don't know कि हमको नहीं पता है कि मुझे नहीं पता है कि क्या होगा, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि कुछ भी हो जाएगा. लाइफ में बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं जो मुझे नहीं पता. आई डोंट नो व्हाट विल हैपन. मुझे पैटर्न नहीं पता चला, लेकिन इसका मतलब नहीं कि कुछ भी हो जाएगा. आई होप यू आर गेटिंग.
Yes.
आई मे
Absolutely.
नॉट फाइंड द राइट
No, no, no. I get you.
सेंटेंस फॉर
Absolutely.
दैट. तो
Yeah.
कुछ भी हो जाएगा इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि कुछ भी हो जाएगा. इवन
Yeah.
रैंडमनेस के अंदर भी बहुत सारे पैटर्न्स होते हैं. ठीक है.
Sure. Sure.
वो तो इसलिए मेरा स्टेटमेंट जनरली होता है कि रैंडमनेस इज नॉट रैंडमली रैंडम. रैंडमनेस इज डिटर्मिनिस्टिकली रैंडम. तो ये रादर देन सेइंग कि रैंडम में कुछ भी हो जाएगा. तो
Sure.
डेफिनेटली चीजें कन्वर्ज कर, जैसे आपने दिखाया कि कन्वर्ज करती हैं चीजें हैं. बहुत सारे प्राइम नंबर्स हैं. प्राइम नंबर्स भी आपको पता नहीं चलेगा कि कब प्राइम नंबर्स आने वाला है, लेकिन उसके भी पैटर्न्स होते हैं बहुत सारे. और एक इसका बहुत बढ़िया एग्जांपल है रीमन हाइपोथेसिस, जो लगता है कि पता नहीं कब होगा, लेकिन अगर आप देखेंगे तो उसका बहुत ही डेफिनेट पैटर्न रहता है. तो इट्स लाइक आपको पता लगेगा कि हो भी रहा है और नहीं भी हो रहा है. पैटर्न है भी और पैटर्न नहीं भी है. वो एक डिलेमा में रहता है. तो
Yeah.
रैंडमनेस डज नॉट मीन कि कुछ भी हो जाएगा चीजों में. ठीक है. वी डोंट नो उसके अंदर में है. तो so at last I would like to appreciate कि whatever you have done, it's wonderful. One must try to solve this problem. अगर नहीं भी solve होगा तो we get to know, because mathematics में numbers केवल it's not just numbers, it gives you the feeling about the life patterns. Because अगर आप देखेंगे कोलैट्स प्रॉब्लम या बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम, आपको पता चलेगा कि जो वर्ल्ड में फ्रैक्टल्स होते हैं, जो क्लाउड के स्ट्रक्चर्स होते हैं, लाइफ में स्ट्रक्चर्स होते हैं, बहुत सारे स्ट्रक्चर्स मैथमेटिक्स से रिलेटेड है इनहेरेंट. So it's not just about solving the problem. That's just one thing. एक broader picture है कि आपके अंदर में वो feeling आती है जिससे it helps you to understand life also at a deeper level. ये चीजें कहती है.
Absolutely.
Numbers are the representations of that. Okay. So
Yeah.
one does not have to worry कि solve हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा है. There are a lot of problems. लेकिन वो जो curiosity है, जो insights हैं जो आपको आ रहे हैं, वो I am really very appreciative of that. Thank you for such a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thanks, Pankaj. Thanks.
So
I think I fully agree with you.
incidentally, Rakeshji,
Yeah.
sorry, incidentally, Rakeshji had shared one a strip in that fish group wherein mathematicians now want God to obey their laws and all, something to that effect. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think very briefly, Pankaj, I agree largely to everything that you said. What comes to my mind is that there is always a cause and effect. When you're looking at mathematics, there is always a cause and there is an effect. We may or may not understand the cause, but things don't happen. Like you said, it's not randomly random. It's deterministically random. When we say that, that means there is a thing which is playing somewhere and because of which it is happening. We may understand, we may not understand. Sometimes we may understand it, but we may not be able to put it mathematically. Okay, so to me, so long as I am able to deep dive into that, what is happening and try to understand the causal relationship, and if I go closer to it, that's good enough. Whether I get to prove it or not, that's a separate kind of a thing. I remember very initial classes of statistics, my professor told me that what we call as randomness is actually an ununderstood, a reason which is not understood. Like if supposing you look at a distribution, you can say that 1, 2, 3 things are definitely affecting this particular distribution. But there are like another 100 other things which may be also affecting, but we don't know or we don't kind of fully understand them. So that's what we basically call as random factor, and then we kind of bring it in. So I think I'm saying exactly the same thing as you are saying, that there's always a cause, there is always a pattern or a reason. Whether we can mathematically express it or not, that's a separate thing. So I was not trying to pull down any mathematical experts, but when I look at those statements in isolation, they look very discouraging. If somebody is wanting to look at this problem, and if you say that mathematics is not equipped to solve this problem, then first thing you would do is you would back out, because I'm not an expert, and experts have said that this is a wall you can't cross. So I will possibly back out. So I think those places, I would say that an expert should be good enough to say that as of now, we don't know how to, do it, but that it cannot be done, or mathematics is, not sufficient enough. That I think is a bit of an overstatement. So I think that's all I would, want to add, but I fully agree with everything that you said.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Just 1 minute. Cause and effect is a whole different topic. We'll come to that later. And definitely, mathematics itself is evolving. So over the time, so many changes are occurring. Now, as I told that people are working on that, whether mathematics is experimental science or not, something like that. Rather than axioms, there exists laws in mathematics, something like that. So these are also the things where the deep discussions are going on. So obviously things are
Absolutely.
evolving, and definitely things would be on the track. So let's
Yeah,
not
and
get
I think
discouraged. Let's
important
not get
is
discouraged.
that we should be aware of arrogance of knowledge actually. And as
Absolutely.
you rightly put,
Absolutely.
there should always be a humility that there's something that I don't know. Maybe in future we will come to know. So there is no definite end to particular knowledge, and
And
we
that
become
arrogance
arrogant
is
about it.
lurking every time. Sorry. Yeah,
Yes,
go ahead.
yes, correct. No, that was the when I was trying to
Yeah,
add to that what Pankaj was
sure.
saying.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Pankaj ji. Arun sir, now it is yours. Can unmute yourself.
Can you see more? Can you see some more hands, Ashutosh?
No, I cannot.
Okay, okay. So let me give some snippets. Today, in the parallel group, Gopal Ranjan ji has said today is all books lovers day. Then somebody says
National Book.
BBD or something. Yeah. So I said, boss, आज मेरे लिए तो आज RBD है, Rakesh Vajpai Day. And of course, so Rakesh is more than justified. I also had in the personal conversations with Rakesh, which I do with almost everybody who's to take a session, what will be the philosophy, content, scope, and methodology of the presentation. So between Rakesh and me, there was a conversation. I had asked Rakesh, I would like to know very much, I would like you to share your mind space. What are the things that were going in your mind before you took one approach? Then what were the things going in your mind when you put that approach aside and took a different approach? And in that process, we shall learn a lot. And Rakesh has done more than that. I mean, now I don't have to ask without my asking the kind of, I would not say results, but I would say learnings that he has had and which he shared was just amazing, and that answered my question. So Rakesh, first question to you is, what happened so that you came to that number 27? You answer the question, I'll carry forward from there after you answer the question. 27.
Okay. So, I mean, I can do it in two ways. One is I might just go back in a moment, 1 minute. I'll just give me a minute to share the slide, and I will. Actually, if you look at, 1 minute. Sorry. Oh, yeah. If you look at this on the left side, I said this is random, but actually, if you look at it in more details, no, you will find something. Sorry, what happened here?
We are seeing.
One
Yeah.
minute, 1 minute. Sorry. Yeah. So, okay, maybe we can do with, okay, this one. Okay, so I said it's like fairly random, but actually there is a pattern here. If you see, there are certain set of numbers here, and then there are certain here, there is nothing in between. And if I actually look at, 0, 1 to 63, this would be somewhere around 34. So up to 34, you have about, 80% of the numbers. And then the remaining 20% come right on top, 100 plus. And the first one, which is this 111, is 27. And if I look at each one of them, the pattern which is created by 27 is actually followed by each one of them. So which is why what happens is, if supposing 27 has taken this long journey, then most of them are continuing to take that long journey. So that is why I felt that if I have to look at, a situation which is more, I would say, kind of representative and, not like the most simplest of ones, then maybe this is the one which, is a good one to take. And it's very fascinating. If I look at that 27 and the kind of numbers and the sequence I get, it's difficult to crack. And if one can understand that, maybe there is much more, revelation available over there. Just give me a minute. I'll be back in a minute. Huh? So I don't know, Arunji, if I answered your question, but broadly that was the thought process because of which I keep considering 27 as my go-to number.
Okay. So if I understood rightly, you plotted the graphs and the 27 became the first number which created lots of noise. Did I understand correctly?
So that is one reason. The second is that supposing I get a sequence of numbers because of 27, like, I got that 9 to 9,200 something. All of the other numbers which are there up to, I'm not saying all numbers going beyond, but up to 63, whichever numbers which are going above 100 in that graph, they are all following that pattern. They are all going via that 9262 and then coming down. So basically 27 has created the pathway and the others are following it.
Excellent. Now I'll just need some time, and especially my statements will be directed more towards the young ones, which always they are. This group itself was formed basically for the young ones. So I hope the young ones have heard about the name Vashishtha Narayan Singh. I mean, there are lots of material available on him, movies being made, etc. Before I mean, he's supposed to be one of the most brilliant mathematicians India has ever produced. Please do not believe all that. If you go to Google, you will find out that most of the things being spoken about him are maybe hyperbolic, but some facts are true. I met this gentleman in a mental hospital in Ranchi in 1983. And not many people were allowed to see him. But since it was my risk, if he becomes violent, the loss will be mine. So I was able to convince the superintendent, I want to meet him in person inside his cell. So I went there. After maybe 15-20 minutes, we established some kind of a rapport. So I asked him, I have been hearing that initially for a PhD thesis, you were working on that Fermi's unknown. Those who do not know much mathematics, it's very simple. Fermi साहब ने कहा था कि दो किसी नंबर्स को लीजिए, उनको स्क्वायर कीजिए, ऐड कीजिए, जैसे कि 3 का स्क्वायर हो गया 9, 4 का स्क्वायर हो गया 16, ऐड किया तो कितना बना 25, 25 5 का स्क्वायर है। मतलब 3 ऐसी संख्याएं हम लोग खोज सकते हैं जिनमें दो संख्याओं को स्क्वायर कर दीजिए, ऐड कर दीजिए, तो जो रिजल्ट आएगा वो तीसरी संख्या का स्क्वायर होगा। ये बात क्यूब के लिए भी सही है। और रामानुजम का एक नंबर था 1789, तो 1 को क्यूब करेंगे तो 1 हुआ, 12 को क्यूब करेंगे तो 1788 होगा, ऐड करेंगे तो 13 का क्यूब है। फर्मी साहब ने प्योरली इंट्यूटिवली, I think lots of questions may be addressed while I'm speaking about, वो प्योर इंट्यूशन था। उन्होंने कहा स्क्वायर और क्यूब करने पर तो मिल जाएगा, लेकिन क्यूब के बाद कोई भी आप पावर रेस करेंगे 4 5 6, संभव ही नहीं है कि दो संख्याओं को आप फोर्थ पावर पर करें, ऐड करें, तो जो रिजल्ट होगा वो किसी संख्या का फोर्थ पावर होगा। वो फिफ्थ सिक्स्थ के लिए सही नहीं है। ये उनका इंट्यूटिव था, इंट्यूशन था। तो उन्होंने कहा कि x टू द पावर n प्लस y टू द पावर n इज इक्वल टू z टू द पावर n। ये 2 और 3 के लिए तो सही है, n के लिए, उसके बाद सही नहीं है। और करीब 400 साल लोगों को लग गए ये साबित करने के लिए कि 3 से बड़ी कोई संख्या हम लोग नहीं ढूंढ सकते हैं जिसमें कि x टू द पावर n प्लस y टू द पावर n इज इक्वल टू z टू द पावर n होगा। ये अभी बहुत हाल में कुछ काफी कॉम्प्लेक्स मैथ्स और लगा करके फर्मी अननोन ने साबित किया लोगों ने, लेकिन काफी 400 सालों तक तो साबित नहीं हुआ था। नाउ मैंने जब वशिष्ठ नारायण सिंह जी से पूछा कि शुरू में शायद आप पीएचडी इस पर करना चाह रहे थे, लेकिन आप ये साबित नहीं कर पाए, तो बोले हाँ, मेरा 3 साल बर्बाद हुआ। लेकिन इस दौरान क्या हुआ, मैंने इस समस्या मतलब x to the power n plus y to the power n is equal to z to the power n will not happen for n equal to or more than 4। इसको मैंने बिल्कुल बच्चे की तरह, माइंड माय वर्ड्स चाइल्ड, बिल्कुल बच्चे की तरह कहा कि ठीक है, अरिथमेटिकली इसको मैं देखूं तो समझ में आ रहा है, क्या मैं इसको जियोमेट्रिकली देख सकता हूं क्या मैं इसको ट्रिग्नोमेट्रिकली देख सकता हूं क्या? और कई तरह से देखते देखते क्या हुआ, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है। मैं उस प्रॉब्लम को तो सॉल्व नहीं कर पाया, लेकिन जैसा कि राकेश जी ने कम से कम मेरे दिमाग में 4 या 5 इनके अचीवमेंट्स ऐसे हैं राकेश के, जो इनके अचीवमेंट्स हैं while trying to solve the problem which he still has not been able to solve, but these 4 achievements are of राकेश। वशिष्ठ नारायण सिंह ने जो कहा मेरा क्या अचीवमेंट हो गया कि मैं इन प्रॉब्लम्स को तो सॉल्व नहीं कर पाया, लेकिन जब इसको मैं ज्योमेट्रिकली मैंने सॉल्व करने की कोशिश की तो एकदम एक नया कॉन्सेप्ट मेरे दिमाग में आ गया, और उसी कॉन्सेप्ट पर बाद में उन्होंने काम किया तो उनको पीएचडी मिली, साइक्लिक वेक्टर्स। तो he found the idea of cyclic vectors which he was able to prove and did a PhD degree while he was unable to finally solve the problem which was supposed to be unsolvable. First thing, let me allow some diversion. So it is not important that we have to prove a truth. No, if truth is truth, it doesn't have to be proven. But what happens when you get passionately involved about trying to prove? There are so many vistas get opened into the mind. They are the achievements. They are the actual achievements. वशिष्ठ नारायण सिंह जी का एक एग्जाम्पल था। दूसरी बात, उन्होंने मुझसे पूछा आप क्या करते हैं वगैरह वगैरह। मैंने कहा मैंने प्राइवेटली एमएससी किया है, तब उन्होंने ये प्रॉब्लम राकेश जो मैंने करीब 40-50 साल के बाद मैंने ग्रुप में डाला था, उन्होंने कहा जरा इसको प्रूफ करने की कोशिश कीजिए। तो राकेश जो आपका फर्स्ट रिएक्शन था बॉस, वही मेरा फर्स्ट रिएक्शन था कि जस्ट ट्राइंग टू प्ले अ ट्रिक। ऐसे ट्रिक्स आपने मैंने बहुत देखे हैं, लेकिन कमिंग फ्रॉम हिम आई टुक इट वेरी सीरियसली। 5-6 दिन मैंने कोशिश किया, तब मुझे जो मालूम पड़ा कि बुढ़े ने तो मुझे फंसा दिया है। 7-8 दिन के बाद मैं फिर उनके पास गया और मैंने 2 बातें की। एक जो कि मणि ने कहा था कि अगर ये ट्रूथ है, इंट्यूटिव है, तो इसको प्रूफ करने के लिए क्यों आप इतने उतावले हैं। तो मैंने कहा, वो उन्होंने कहा बताऊंगा बताऊंगा। भोजपुरी में बात करते थे कि बताई तोरा के तो तू का कैला है, व्हाट हैव यू डन इन लास्ट 7 days। मैंने कहा राकेश मैंने इतना तो मेहनत नहीं की थी जितना कि आपने की है। डेफिनेटली यू हैव डन एक्सपांसिव वर्क। लेकिन करीब 50 100 60 120 नंबर मैंने 100-150 नंबर मैंने भी किए थे। और तब मैंने कहा ये नंबर 27 गुरुजी हमको बड़ा प्रॉब्लम कर रहा है। तो राकेश ही आस्क्ड मी द सेम क्वेश्चन व्हिच आई आस्क्ड यू, how did you think of this number 27? And I gave him the honest answer, no deduction, no working. While working, I thought this is a very intriguing number. Now Rakesh, what he told me was कि तू बहुत दूर जेबा, you will go very far in life। चलो उसको मैं डिलीट कर देता हूं। उन्होंने 3-4 बातें बिल्कुल कही। कहा 27 नंबर बड़ा डिवाइन नंबर है, आपको मालूम है इसको हम लोग एंजल नंबर बोलते हैं। इसको एंजल नंबर बोलने के बहुतों के बहुत अपने अपने कारण है। लिटरेचर में अलग कारण है, एस्ट्रोलॉजी में अलग कारण है, न्यूमरोलॉजी में अलग कारण है। फिर उन्होंने कहा कि आपको पता है कि अंग्रेजी में कितने अल्फाबेट्स हैं। तो मैं जान गया कि यह प्रॉब्लम के पीछे कुछ मतलब इनका और है। तो मैंने कहा नहीं मालूम है सर। तो बोले अच्छा किया कि नहीं मालूम है। बोले 27 है। देयर वेयर 27 अल्फाबेट्स इन इंग्लिश and there still are 27 alphabets in Greek, Spanish and Hebrew। तो वो तो खैर मजाक की बात कर रहे थे। बाद में बोले 27 स्पिरिचुअली इतना डेवलप्ड नंबर है कि जो काफी स्पिरिचुअली डेवलप्ड हैं, most of them have been reported to say that they dream of 27, sometimes suddenly they think of 27, and which means these people who think about 27 come to 27 even by so-called default. These people have fantastic amount of intuition. So these people must respect their intuition and follow the guidance which comes from within. This is the beauty of 27. Now I will end here because my learnings were great. Rakesh, I will again see the video at least twice or thrice. Like when you talked about incentive becomes more if it becomes reward. I mean, if it is rewarding or motivation. Or you talked about reaction versus response. Sometimes we react and we do not know whether it is reaction or it is respond. So all these things definitely have to learn. But basically, I'm ending this. I totally am on the same page as you, Rakesh, that there are many intuitions, there are many truths which need not be proven. They are facts. And why do we need to prove them? My stage is number 1. No, you don't have to prove them. Forget about it. Number 2, still there will be some people who would like to prove. The second set of people are lucky because while trying to prove and failing in proving that, they will learn much more than they would have learned in their entire life. Rakesh, thank you very much. Ashutosh.
थैंक यू राकेश जी। राकेश जी बहुत कुछ बोला जा सका। अरुण सर ने जिस तरह से समाप्त किया पूरी चीजों को, उससे इतना कुछ सीखने को मिला। एक चीज मैं आपसे पूछना चाह रहा था कि आपने इतनी मेहनत किया, हैव यू थॉट ऑफ पब्लिशिंग इट समवेयर, बिकॉज इट इज एन आइडियल केस ऑफ अ वेरी गुड पेपर, आई वुड से मैथमेटिकल पेपर। इफ यू हैव नॉट थॉट ऑफ, आई वुड एडवाइज काइंडली सीरियसली थिंक ऑफ पब्लिशिंग इट।
मतलब मैंने क्या किया, मैंने एक ब्लॉग पोस्ट बनाया और ये जो रिसेंट है ये नहीं डाला है मैंने, लेकिन I have put it on one of the blog posts. No, not the last part. That lookup table is something that I have done it before that, but I have kept it anonymous and I have kind of just left it there. The idea is in case somebody is looking for a solution and kind of they find this helpful, maybe they can go ahead and go beyond possibly what is there in that. So I have to update that, and it's a good reminder for me. But honestly, this publishing in a paper, etc., I've not. I mean, it's not a motivation so much really for me,
Listen, you must do.
and I think it requires some kind of a peer review before I can, think of
We
that.
have we have people like Pankaj ji and Arun ji who can do the peer review. So you must do. I mean, I'm insisting on this
मैं
that you must publish it. Yes.
I
Sorry,
would
Pankaj ji, बोलिए.
yeah, I would like to add कि जो भी इस टाइप ऑफ सेलिब्रेटेड प्रॉब्लम्स जो होते हैं ना, मैं जो जर्नल मैं अपना एक्सपीरियंस आपको बता रहा हूँ. जो जर्नल के एडिटर्स होते हैं, दे आल्सो डोंट वांट टू टेक रिस्क एट टाइम्स. ठीक है कि वो कमेंट देने में कि ऐसा होगा या नहीं होगा. तो बेटर दे वुड एडवाइज कि इस टाइप के सेलिब्रेटेड प्रॉब्लम्स जो हैं, आप किसी से डिस्कशन करो, किसी एक्सपर्ट के साथ डिस्कशन करो और लेट देम पब्लिकली कर दो. क्योंकि आपको मैं बता दूं कि जो एक रशियन मैथमेटिशियन थे जिनको फिल्ड्स मेडल मिला था, लेकिन उन्होंने को रिफ्यूज कर दिया था. उन्होंने प्रॉब्लम सॉल्व किया था, जियोमेट्रिक एक कंजेक्चर है, मैं भूल रहा हूँ क्या नाम था, 2010 के आसपास. ही पुट इट ऑन पब्लिकली और देन वो किसी भी जर्नल उन्होंने नहीं दिया. इट वाज अ माइंड ब्लोइंग थिंग. तो मैं जस्ट ये बोलना चाह रहा हूँ कि जो सेलिब्रेटेड प्रॉब्लम्स होते हैं ना, जो बहुत अनसॉल्व्ड हैं, इसके एक अलग ही प्रोसेस होते हैं अदर देन कि वैसे डेफिनेटली यू शुड ट्राई टू पब्लिश, दैट वुड बी ग्रेट. क्योंकि ऐसे जो एडिटर्स होते हैं वो भी एट टाइम्स रिस्क नहीं लेना चाहते हैं कि मैं क्या कमेंट करूँ. हो सकता है बाद में ये सही निकल गया और मैं कुछ अलग कमेंट कर रहा हूँ. तो लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स आर गोइंग ऑन इन एडिटर्स माइंड्स आल्सो. आई एम जस्ट गिविंग यू अ फैक्ट. अदरवाइज यू शुड डेफिनेटली ट्राई. आपको ट्राई करना चाहिए.
So I think two people whom I have taken help of. So one is the Pankarda. He couldn't attend today's session, but almost everything I have done, I have bounced this off him. And in fact, a couple of pointers were because of him.
Okay.
I think this session would be incomplete. He brought up some, and that kind of got me thinking. The context may have been different, but that got me thinking. And it led me to some, additional things. And secondly, that Apex series, when I was explaining to him, he said, how do you know there is nothing above it? And then again, that was a good pointer. So when I said that, logical proof is only missing because of one thing, it is exactly only that the fact that one is that Apex series is the top series is something I can prove. And also that all the numbers are there in that table that can be proved. But that they kind of follow and nothing is missed out. That is the only thing which is remaining in terms of a logical or mathematical proof. So he has been very helpful. The second is my guide from IIT. So I kind of had, actually I could only have one session with him. He was very keen and he kind of, went through the whole thing. Unfortunately, he was kind of, in the car and he was like really straining to see it on the mobile. So I've not had a second session with him, but he is again, mathematically, he is superb. So if I get an opportunity, I'll definitely have one session with him to kind of, get a bounce off. But that's more to kind of, just figure out if there is still something that I'm missing. Otherwise, just like what Pankaj said, I'm happy just putting it out there and, kind of if somebody finds it great and, they can kind of take it ahead from there.
But it will get lost.
Just one line before
Rakesh ji.
Sarita
that
ma'am.
way.
Sarita ma'am has raised the hand. Rakesh, I'm going to send your video
No, I did
video
not.
to my Sarita ma'am. Just 1 second. To my friends in TIFR, with whom I worked for teaching the students for International Maths Olympiad. The moment Ashutosh ji is uploading the video, I'm definitely going to send at least to 2 of my friends in TIFR, and I will send you back the feedback that I get. Okay, Sarita
Sure.
ma'am.
Thank you so much.
I did
Sarita ma'am
not.
did not raise her.
Yeah, I did not raise hand, but I just wanted to say, Rakesh, I was like, opened my mouth and the whole time I was in awe. I thought, what did he do? How did he come up with these discoveries? So it was like, okay, this someone is a great mathematician and resolving issue. But one thing I said, yes, curiosity. That is the best thing, I mean, about this whole process. And the second thing about I think this is also arrogance, human arrogance that we will resolve. we will ultimately resolve. I think this is a little too much of arrogance. It's the same arrogance that we think we are alone. A tiny little blue dot has the only life form in out of trillions and trillions of billions of galaxies and trillions of stars. So that is kind of arrogance that, okay, we will resolve. There are so many things will remain unresolved during until we even after human like extinction. So yes, this is a, and the second thing which I liked about the randomness part, we also call in medicine that it is random, but it still does, it has a pattern.
Right,
Because
right.
you have the limit. Yeah, you have the limit. So there are few things, it sounded like a close to what I practice, but multiple things went over my head, tell you the truth.
Sorry
One thing
about
what
that.
was very, yeah, no, but the calculation part, how you are reaching, I was able to understand because that's just the
Sure.
arithmetic part. Yes.
Yep.
One thing it was very surprising, the waveforms you showed, couple of waveforms looks like when you put a catheter on the right side of the heart. It looked like that.
They are meant
It
for
was
that. They
very
are meant
interesting.
to raise your heartbeat.
So no, when you put a catheter, the pressure inside the heart, how it changes in different chamber in different
Yes.
area, it
Yes.
gives you a pattern, and it looked like that. I thought maybe God has some real maths in heart too. So that was interesting. Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sarita ji.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. I'll
Definitely,
stop
math.
recording now.
Math,
Mhm.
math is just 1 minute. If just one, may I speak?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, Pankaj.
Yes, go.
Yeah, definitely. Even in biological world, mathematics is very much abundant. And sorry, Rakesh sir, definitely if you can forward me, I can forward to many mathematicians around the world what you have done. But the point, I personally don't get into this because I'm already involved with some other problems. And if I get into this incident means accidentally, then what happens that my curiosity becomes out of control for me. Then I forget all other problems. Then my entire direction will go in this direction only. So that's why I
Sure.
deliberately am not going into this detail. So,
Yeah, yeah.
but nevertheless, if you forward me, I can definitely send to some top class mathematicians if you
Sure.
like. That's not a
No,
problem.
no issues on that, Pankaj. I mean, it's like, I am not kind of, I really am not much motivated in that direction in any case. So I think if there is someone who does that review, fantastic. But I mean, that's how it is. So no worries on that, definitely. I think Arunji has
Ashutosh,
already kind of suggested something. In fact, Arunji, I might kind of, document this. This was more like to explain all the experience part of it. But for somebody who's like hardcore into mathematics, I can actually just document it nicely and then share also. So
Ashutosh, I can see some new people who have joined and a young one. So why don't you ask them to unmute and maybe come up with their reactions?
I think they have all
At least
left.
one. Oh, they have all left. Okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Ashutosh, all you.
Oh, so fine. I think we are good to conclude now. And thank you so much, Rakesh ji. And
Thank you.
once again, I'll request you, all this good work and hard work may get lost. So in the interest, not in your own interest, but in the interest of mathematics, kindly think of
I will.
publishing it. I'll still
I
say.
will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good day to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.